Okay, so hello and welcome to this channel where people actually are sharing their awakening stories. And I'm very happy to have James with me today. And I stumbled upon James also on YouTube. He has his own channel, and of course, maybe you're gonna share that afterwards. I will put it in the link because you have a lot of good information there also when people are struggling in that process. And yeah, so let's just start and hear your story and your insights along that journey. The best way for me is always to just ask, how are you doing today? So what are you doing also for work? Where are you living?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Today, yeah, I'm doing well. Beautiful sunny day. I've just been out in the garden a lot of the day doing some gardening.
Oh,
Um, got a little herb garden and some strawberry patch and just doing that and been for a beautiful walk. So I've just had a really chilled out day. No work today or anything like that. So that's been beautiful. I live in Halifax, which is in the north of England in Yorkshire,
mhm.
and yeah, for work, I like offer various healing practices. I do shamanic breathwork journeys, like group holotropic breathing. So I do those. I do hands-on healing as well for people. I like working with the Kundalini Shakti energy and doing hands-on healing. And I do some sound healing as well. Got like a set of crystal singing bowls. And I'm also a musician, and I've got a couple of ambient guitar albums out. So I
Oh, nice.
create really chilled out, beautiful music, and put in lots of like healing intent into the music. It's all tuned to like 432 hertz as well. So yeah, I've got two albums that I recorded myself, and they're out as well. And I also, as you said, I've got like a YouTube channel where I talk about my experience with Kundalini,
Mm.
and I offer guidance sessions for people if they're going, through the process. Because, as I'm sure we'll get into, my experience was particularly brutal with this energy, especially for the first like 6 years. I would say it was very, very
Wow.
difficult.
Oh my God, it's
So
crazy.
yeah, I've got quite a lot of experience of going through a very physically, especially difficult and quite prolonged dark night of the soul period. So yeah, I help other people just like going through that experience.
Amazing. Yeah, and for me that also came up very strongly because yeah, I'm 6 years in the process now, and this is you know how it is. It's not very long. The first 4 years you're just trying to figure out what the hell is happening, and then for me it was the experience after 4 years I get accustomed to it. Also in the way of I wasn't talking to nearly anybody about it because I was scared that people think I'm crazy or that I think I'm enlightened now or whatever. So you just deal with it on your own, and this is also like a calling for me that as long as I shut up, people will not talk about it, and it really needs now more sharing, and that people have other people where they can talk about it. And here in Switzerland and also in the whole German area, there's no spiritual emergency centers, nothing like that. So my worry is also that a lot of people, they actually end up in a psych ward, and they get medicated the wrong way. They're getting called, you have a psychosis, and then it's just a downward spiral. Because I know out of my own process, I actually was very lucky because I had kind of a psychotic episode.
Right.
People would call it that way. But I was happy that my sister, she's a psychiatrist and a very good one. So she sensed, no, 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 it's something else, because I was always, when I had visions or when I saw stars traveling over the sky, I tried to find out. I was Googling, like, what could that be? Because am I crazy now? So when somebody's doing that, you don't have a psychosis because you still ask yourself, what the hell is happening?
Yeah.
And I think it's really high time because people wake up on a big scale.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So also psychiatrists and people who deal with um, such people who come in, they need a bit of awareness so that people get the right help.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing what you're doing. How is it? Do a lot of people find you and get help?
Yeah, quite a lot. Really just through YouTube. I do. Yeah, I'd say like I don't. I don't have like a massive amount of clients for the Kundalini stuff. More of my work is in the in person stuff, but I'd say I get anywhere between yeah, between about like 4 to 8 people a month um, having like video sessions with me, and usually a lot of that, like you were saying about, you know, we don't. There's not many people we can talk to about this.
Mm.
I mean, luckily in my life now, I actually know quite a few people going through this in the three
Exactly.
in my 3D world. But for many years, I didn't know anybody, and I had nobody to speak to at all. It was very isolating, very difficult to get people to understand like the
Yeah.
process. I remember for like years just thinking, oh, if only I could just touch someone and like just for 5 minutes, they could feel what was going on, just so I could get that
Yeah, the same. I
understanding.
was actually thinking about, hey, I really would love to do an MRI
Yeah,
because I don't know, I can go with my awareness to a certain point and tissues will start to move and to unknot, and that should actually, it should be possible to see it on an MRI. I don't know. I was
yeah,
also thinking about stuff like that, but yeah, to just also show the scientific world, no, there's something happening. When you go with your consciousness, when the consciousness slipped into your nervous system and you can kind of direct it, then something is happening,
yeah. I mean, that'd be incredibly interesting to see.
right?
I imagine as we move forward, um, yeah, whether or not I don't know. Like, yeah, they might see areas in the brain lighting up. I don't know whether the sort of scientific tools are at the level where they can pick up on these subtle energies enough yet. I don't really know, but I imagine like within the next, I don't know, 10, 15 years or something, there's going to be so many people having this awakening experience that it's going to have to be looked at more by like the scientific institutions and stuff. So that would be really interesting, I think.
Yeah, it would be important. Actually, I was watching one of your videos where you show your Kriyas,
Yeah.
and I found it absolutely fascinating because there's not a lot of good videos where people show what is happening.
Mm.
And yeah, maybe if you allow me, maybe you can send me also some footage that we can put it in this video, because it's
Yeah, yeah,
important
sure.
for people to see what is happening. And yeah, it's also fascinating for me that whenever I see that footage, it actually also for people who don't go through a Kundalini awakening, when I see it, they can kind of relate to it, what is happening. It's that it's like breathing in and breathing out, and the body is doing that on another kind of level, and people can relate to it.
Yeah, yeah, because it's also giving people like that physical view of like a very internal process, because we can use words to describe how this energy moves in the body and feels, but that's very difficult for someone to fully understand or understand. And but yeah, when they see the energy move in the body, I guess that gives it's a little,
Mhm.
it's a bridge, it's a bridge into the 3D of what that energy is
Yeah,
doing. So I
yeah.
think it And yeah, I think just touching on what you were saying about people going into mental institutions, things like that, I imagine that was really common in the past, and I think that still does go on.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, it's super important for people to speak about these processes, like you say, like you're doing, like I'm doing, so the awareness becomes, much greater, so that doesn't happen to people as much. Because even when so my awakening started with Kundalini in 2010, and there was hardly anything even on the internet even back then. Like
But
it's
did you
so
know? Did you know what it was?
I did, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
good.
Thankfully, the universe was
Yeah,
like on
because
my
otherwise you
side.
freak out.
Yeah. So about 2 years before my Kundalini awoke, um, and I guess, well, I'd already started waking up in certain ways, but about 2 years before Kundalini, my spiritual awakening like really started accelerating. And I remember I read a book called Tales from the Time Loop by David Icke, and he talks about in that book, like he had this Kundalini activation in Peru in 1991, I think it was. And I remember thinking, wow, that sounds incredible. And at the same time I was reading that book, I also came across all these blog posts that were talking about Kundalini and all sorts of esoteric, interesting stuff at the time. So I got these 2 points at the same time talking about this Kundalini. And I started becoming quite obsessed with the caduceus symbol, the two serpent and the wings. I started becoming quite obsessed with that, and I started seeing it everywhere. Like, I don't know, like in England, like in Manchester, which is where I was living at the time. Well, I was living in Bristol, but I moved to Manchester not long after that, and I would see like there's like caduceus on the walls on buildings and stuff, like carved into the stone and stuff, and it was like my consciousness was just like pulled to these symbols, and it became like this synchronistic thing for me, this caduceus symbol. So it was like I was being prepared. So then when it awoke, I already very helpful, because I think if I hadn't have had like that understanding and like the intensity of it, I don't know what I would have done. I was very much being guided by the universe to have this understanding of what was going on. So that was, yeah, that was really beautiful and helpful.
So, what I'm also always asking is, so are you aware that you actually did something to trigger
Yeah,
a Kundalini awakening, and what was it?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I guess so there was something very specific, but I'll touch on some plant medicine experiences that were leading up to it, because I think that's important as well. So
Mhm.
6 months before the Kundalini awakening, I'd been using plant medicines, like working with mushrooms, for about 2 years prior to the Kundalini awakening.
Mhm.
I had done them recreationally when I was way younger, like in my late teens and early 20s. Um, but basically, around the time that I've just mentioned, when I read that book and started getting all the caduceus synchronicities, I read a book called The Tao of Physics, which is about the parallels between Eastern mysticism and
Mm,
modern physics.
interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting book. And
Mhm.
it didn't talk about plant medicines in that book, but it just piqued my interest. It was just like it piqued my interest that there was something in those experiences that I'd had, like in my late teens and early 20s, that I didn't fully appreciate. I started to realize, oh, it was like opening these doorways into these mystical realms, and so I decided I'd go back to the mushrooms, but in a much more reverent and like way,
Mhm.
like honoring it and a more ceremonial way. And anyway, that accumulated after about 2 years of me building up to doing a 5 dried gram mushroom trip, which is what like Terence McKenna calls a heroic dose. So it's quite a big
It is crazy.
quite a big experience.
Sorry, James, this is really crazy because I did 3 grams once. I was sucked in crazy. And again, ego death.
Sure. Yeah, it's very strong. And also what I find with mushrooms is it's like the intensity goes up exponentially. You know, like from say like 1 to 3 is a big jump, and but then from 3 to 5 is like it's even bigger. It's like this, yeah. Um, so I did that, and I just had a massive initiatory experience doing that. I won't. It'd take me like half an hour to really tell the story, but I'll try and condense it a little bit because I don't want to, you know, I've got a video on it if people want to go a bit more into it. But essentially, um, after about half an hour of taking these mushrooms, I found myself in this kind of golden dome-like structure. And there were two beings there. There was a being that was like behind me and a being in front of me, and they were like these black kind of shining, glowing beings with long arms and long fingers and long necks. They were like, yeah, it was it was weird. And anyway, the one behind me put its hands on either side of my ear, and I heard this noise like in my head, just like this high pitch, just going higher and higher and higher. And it got to this certain point, and when it got to this point of intensity, the one in front, the being in front, like reached out, and these two fingers like touched either nostril. And when it did that, I just felt like air or life or something just like shoot into my body, and I kind of like sat up and because I'd had my eyes shut at that point, and basically I looked at my hands and I no longer had human hands. I had like bird talons, like made of light, and I was shifting into a bird. I had like wings, and I could feel like I could feel like yeah, I like reached forward and I could feel like a beak coming out of my face. I could feel the air coming into these little nostrils, and then it was just rapidly shifting between all these different animals. And every animal it moved into, I could completely feel what it felt like to be that animal. So like this kind of raw power of like this grizzly bear for a while, and then like there was a serpent as well, and I felt like my head like squashing. And at one point I was like, James, you need to sort your head out. And as I said, sort, it went like and like this snake's tongue like just like, flew out of my mouth. I was like, oh my god. And I kind of started freaking out, to be honest, at that point.
Yeah.
Got pretty scared. I forgot like I'd forgotten that I'd taken mushrooms. I was like, I didn't really know what was going on. I was like, am I asleep? I just couldn't get any grip on what was going on. And it was just rapidly shifting between all these different animals. And yeah, when I say I was part human all the time, it was like I was like therianthropic. I was like half human, half animal. It was like their energy was like dancing with my human energy. Anyway, after a while of getting really freaked out with this, I just heard this voice or thought that was kind of audible, and it basically just said, "It's a shamanic transformation." And as soon as I heard that, like everything just settled, like the fear just settled, like all this kind of panic that I was in dissipated immediately. And then the energy settled on this feline energy. So it was like part tiger, part lion. I was like, I was human, but I had like these cat paws, and like my hands were like in this thing. I could see like you know, like stripes, like made of light, like tiger stripes. I had like this mane of like it was all made of light though, and then every cat you can imagine, there was like these geometric grids everywhere, like with my eyes open. Every cat you can imagine was just like bounding out of these grids of light and like purring and roaring and growling at me, and like cheetahs, lions, tigers, domestic cats, panthers, you know, the whole thing. And it was like this beautiful greeting from this kind of feline energy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the rest of the journey, I mean, there's a lot more to it, but I was part human, part tiger lion for the rest of that experience. And I was growling kind of almost uncontrollably. I was purring, roaring, like, and these abilities were insane. They were so powerful. And the purring was like this kind of healing vibration through my whole body.
Mm.
And there were other things as well. Like at one point, I could see these like white filament grids everywhere. Like because my tent, I was in a tent, but my tent walls had become partially see through. It was like I was in 2 dimensions at once, basically. and I was in so much joy. Like I was like having these huge belly laughs, and I could see electricity just like rippling out through these grids like everywhere.
Wow.
And yeah, so I mean, like I said, there's more to it, but that's the kind of gist of it. So I had this big initiatory experience on the mushrooms, and then after that, when I sort of came back to normal reality, um, synchronicity just started going absolutely crazy in my life, like really crazy, like tying into that. There's so many examples of this, but one of the most insane ones, I was a street fundraiser, like for Friends of the Earth at the time in Manchester. So I was out on the streets working with people, you know, like every day. And literally about, it was about a week after that experience, a woman who was, she was obviously quite mentally unwell. She was homeless and maybe like an alcoholic or something like that. But I was speaking to a woman and a child about the charity and stuff, and this other woman just came, walked right up to me, interrupted this conversation, grabbed me by the shoulders, and she's staring into my eyes, and she was like going, "The animal spirits are rising, the animal spirits are rising," and then she like just let go and just like walked off down the street, and I was just like,
Oh,
you know, like, and that's one example of many synchronicities that were happening around this, and it was like my life had like turned into this weird kind of mythic, I can't even describe it, like I felt like there'd been a massive shift as well, in my consciousness after that experience. I think it's possible that I had some kind of top-down Kundalini activation in that mushroom experience, which I didn't really weren't really fully aware of at the time, because I had like energy just pouring into my head for quite a number of quite a long time during that mushroom experience. So, but when I came back, I was just in this totally like different state of being, just like really like, yeah, I just felt so different. I remember drinking alcohol for the first time after that experience, and I couldn't get drunk anymore. Like there was part of my consciousness that was just watching like this drunk part of me, and there was this part that just wouldn't get drunk, and it was just like looking at this drunk part, just like, what are you doing, what are you doing? And so it was really really strange, and I'd stopped drinking not long after that, but so yeah, I'm just sort of trying to get the point across that that was like quite an initiatory experience, and that it got me into this space where I started seeing reality quite differently, and the possibilities of what could happen.
mhm.
So then get into your kind of question. About 6 months after that, I had really bad posture, and I was in quite a bad way physically, because when I was 18, so I'm 27 at this time, as in 20, like when I had that experience with the mushrooms and stuff. But
Mhm,
when I was
mhm.
18, I got a chest infection, and I ended up in hospital. It was really bad. I now can see that that was completely related to some emotional trauma that was going on at that time, like around sexuality and stuff. There was like this big emotional trauma, but at the time I didn't realize that those two things were linked. And I had this chest infection, and I ended up having like this kind of continuous, really intense cough for about 2 years. And at that time in my life as well, I was in a band. I was not being healthy. I was like going out and, you know, like partying and drinking and taking certain drugs and stuff. So, and it really, basically this chronic coughing like really messed up it damaged all the muscles, especially around my lungs. It damaged my posture, like up to the neck and like down. Yeah, my whole posture was out. I shared a photo on my video when I was talking about my Kundalini awakening of like what my posture was like, and literally, I mean, I can't even do it now, but like my shoulders were like so out of alignment. It was
Oh,
something like that. You know, it was really really
eh,
bad.
yeah. And you know what I find very fascinating is I was already hearing your story when I saw your YouTube video, and when you were talking about this, um, you describe exactly my misalignment I have in my body, but I have it on the right side.
Right.
So, and this the my Kundalini, it's really, the problem is she's active in the right side, and she's working on all these damaged tissues. So the left side is kind of dormant,
Right.
which is, I don't know if you had that as well, because you had to work through there a lot, but it's really annoying because sometimes I feel also a bit like, well, she's kind of burning through. She should really move to the other side, but she's just, oh, and doing, and it's annoying.
Yeah. I
How
mean,
was
I
it
get,
for you? She was also active on one side then, or?
no, not really. She was everywhere all the time, pretty much from the beginning for me.
Yeah.
But there were certainly more blockages in my left side. It was like the blockages in my left side, in the lower half of my body, but my right side up here, because
Mm-hmm.
like because of like I think that
Yeah.
was, yeah. So it was, yeah. But the Kundalini energy, once it awoke, it was pretty much everywhere all the time. Like,
Mhm.
and it has been for since then. But also, just on your point, I feel like, yeah, we just got to tune into that fact that she knows exactly what she's doing. So like wherever she's working at whatever time is like absolutely correct, you know. Like I
Yes,
might
I
sometimes
know, but
yeah,
this is also something we can talk about here, and your very long experience. I mean, I know people always tell me let her do her stuff. But this is easier said than done because sometimes it's so really annoying when she's just pushing and pushing. Especially like last night, I had another night where I'm really like I'm so tired and I want to sleep, and she starts to work when I'm in bed, and it's like no. And then I know, okay, now I'm in for that for at least 2 hours.
yeah.
She, at least, I mean, this is, then it's nice. But normally it's like 2 to 4 hours.
Mm,
And so then I sometimes get really annoyed, and then I start to direct her.
mm,
So when she's too pushy on one side, I start to direct her on the other side.
right.
And yeah, you maybe you know more because actually it helps. I can really then I feel her also working on the other side, but I don't know if this is a good idea. I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, I generally just let her do whatever she's doing, but I can consciously move her to anywhere I want. So sometimes when I'm doing like some self healing, or especially when I'm doing healing work for other people, well, I don't direct it when I'm doing healing work for other people, but I can charge the energy up in my body basically.
Mhm.
Like if I just tune into it, I can like really charge it, and it it's just like it just goes straight into like this bliss energy flowing all the way through the body now. That's kind of what it's like for me. There are still some areas where it's a bit blocked, but and it just like feel it pouring out my hands. Like I mean, you won't be able to see on camera probably, but like all my hairs just stand on end as soon as I start like charging it and stuff. So I can do that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess it's just like experimenting with it and see what works in your body. But I generally just let her do her thing. That's generally what I do.
Yeah.
She's working.
I always ask, and then in the end I also know the answer. I mean, this is also something you learn during that process, right? As soon as I ask somebody, I'm like, oh, forget it. I mean, I have to know it's my process. I know best, and she will show me when it's
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
not a good idea.
Yeah, and she'll teach you. She'll teach you, and you'll get messages through dreams, or you'll just get feedback in the body of how it feels after you've done that compared to when you let it flow. And so it's like a very student teacher kind of relationship that can develop between you and that energy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not the very patient type of person.
No, I don't think I used to be, but I feel like one of the biggest lessons I had to learn in this whole journey, especially with all those bedbound years and stuff, was like patience is one of the biggest, was
Mm.
one of the biggest things that I had to tune into, like patience, surrender, self-compassion as well. I think those three things, there's probably others, but those three things were really big for me. Um, yeah.
But
Sure.
do you still have like Dark Night of the Soul episodes, or is that pretty gone?
Um, sometimes the
Uh, wait, just let me explain to the listeners. I
yeah,
mean, Dark Night of the Soul actually for me is something which, when I hear all these stories from other people, mostly it's at the beginning there is one. That's why you're starting your journey and you want to know the truth because you're fed up with suffering.
yeah,
I hear a lot, but for me, that for sure was on my in my case. But also during now my 7 years into the journey, I have these episodes where it's like, uh, especially when I actually did a big leap in wisdom.
mm,
It's like the biggest struggle I have at the moment is that because I don't want to accomplish anything anymore, like before maybe you thought, yeah, I should do this and that, and then people will find that wonderful, or I will have a career, and then I really. But when all of that falls away, there can dark night, well, kind of depressive states happen because, yeah, am I doing now? Who am I? What is my passion? And I think that is also important for people because in my own experience, I then often had these self-loathing moments where I was like, hey, you're so ungrateful. Yeah, now you have that wonderful gift and you start to be depressed again. What is wrong with you? And I think it's important for people to know that this can also be part of the process, that, yeah, you have the self-doubts in order to work through them again.
yeah, absolutely. And in order to like move into a space of compassion and love for that part of you that is self-doubting, I feel like all these kind of characters in our psyche, that part that comes in and criticizes, that inner critic that will come in and criticize us, these are little parts of us that got broken off through traumatic events when we were younger usually, and they're essentially like, they think they're protecting us. I think nearly all of them think they're protecting us, like, because it's like protecting you from stepping out, maybe like, oh, you're not good enough to do this, you're not good enough to do that, because they've got that fear of like, oh, if we do it, then there's going to be this pushback, or there's going to be abuse from people, or all that stuff. And they just need love and acceptance and holding, and bringing back in. That's how I really try and work with those parts like that, of like, okay, this is just a little wounded part of me that needs love, it needs holding, it needs integration, it needs to be welcomed back into the whole. And yeah, so that's kind of like how I work with them. I love the shamanic concept of like soul retrieval, which is when we have traumatic experiences, little parts of our soul, or you could say psyche, get fragmented, and they're always wanting to come back for integration. So that's like a very shorthand way of explaining like how I kind of work with those issues and things like that. Yeah. But do I still have dark nights of the soul? I mean, yeah, yeah. Sometimes, like, it depends. There's nothing to the level of what I went through after Kundalini awoke, and I doubt I'll ever have to go through anything like that again in this lifetime. Hopefully, not in any more, please.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, things come up that happen in the external world that affect me and bring stuff up still. I went through I went through one relatively recently, to do with like a relationship breaking down that I was in, and that brought up quite a lot of stuff. But I've got a lot more tools to deal with them, and there's a lot more separation between what's going on and my kind of observant
Yeah, exactly.
mind, so it's not the same. I'm not in it to the level that I would have been many years ago. It's like there's a part of me that's seeing
Yeah,
the storm in the ocean of my emotions and stuff, and kind of holding myself through it as much as I can. um
yeah,
and
yeah, nice. Yeah, it's just that this is also part of what I like to do is demystifying a bit, because um, out of my experience, first of all, when my Kundalini awakened, honestly, I was like, huh? Why me? I'm like smoking, I'm cursing all the time, and I'm a fucking asshole to my kids sometimes. Huh? I was thinking that happens to a saint,
yeah,
and I really, really want to demystify such stuff. Also, that people don't think when you are in that process that you are now the fucking enlightened Buddha or whatever. We are really down to earth people.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when I talk to people like you, it's always so beautiful and amazing because yeah, we're down to earth. And exactly, we still have our issues. We still break down when relationships are crumbling down. I mean, it affects. Yeah, we still stay human, and we want to stay human.
yeah. 100%. And I think the Kundalini journey ultimately it's a journey of like spiritual integration. Like, yeah, you're gonna have these times when you're like blown out, and I've had many of them, like where you're blown out into these like other realms, and like, extremely kind of ungrounded in a way, and really in the mythic sort of space. But it's ultimately it's about bringing that back down into the physical body. The Kundalini process is a very embodied experience. It's working on all levels, like the physical, the emotional, the mental, all these different, like the spiritual planes, all these different levels, and it's bringing it down. So it's like connecting out into that um like divine space. I mean, it's all divine really, but it's difficult with the language, but connecting out, bringing that down into the body and kind of emanating that into this 3D physical reality. So I definitely view it as ultimately a very grounded spiritual journey. um,
Mm.
and there's that Zen saying, like, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's like there's a return, but you come back with a different inner landscape and a different space.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. The coming back, I found that very difficult. And that's why I started to do ayahuasca then because and this is very interesting to see how, okay, I'm free of not wanting to have a career like in the outside anymore, but actually inside I'm still very career driven. Like, oh, I fucking want to know now, and I want to know now. And this is also, it's not good. So yeah, then I try to push too hard, and yeah,
Well,
you learn and learn, and yeah, yeah, you have to try it to be patient, and
yeah.
yeah.
And
So
I remember, so like my career, if you want to call it that, like the healing things that I'm doing now, the work I'm doing now. Um, I remember just before I kind of started to step out, because I literally had like a decade-long hermit phase. Maybe I'll explain, like, because I
yeah,
never
I
got to
really would
explain like
like
how
to
my
know.
Kundalini work, but I'll maybe get back to that. But yeah, like on the other side, when I was kind of starting to come back into the world, I remember just like I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, and I remember just asking Spirit, like, I had like these, should I focus on my music again? Should I focus on sound healing? But all these different things. And I was asking Spirit one night, and I had a dream that night after asking, and I got taken to this place in the dream, and I met this guide. And basically the guide just said to me, it doesn't matter what you do. What matters is how you do it. And then it was
Amen.
like, right, you need to go back now. And I like flew off in this dream and woke up,
Oh
and it was
my
just like,
God,
oh, right.
James, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I needed to hear this right now.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the energy. Like you can work on a supermarket till, you know, if you're radiating that energy, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's transforming the world. It's transforming everybody you interact with. It's, you know, it's transforming you while you're doing it. It's like,
Yes.
and every little cog in society is, and the human journey is all important. It's all part of this shared experience, you know. So that's kind of like, yeah, what I try to tune into.
Yeah. So, but now I really, I like to hear just shortly. So, when was the first time you experienced the energy in your body, and how was that? And then let us know. Yeah, I think it went dormant with you for a moment,
Yeah, so that's
right?
quite an
And then
interesting
it
part
came
there.
back.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So yeah, after all that experience that I talked about earlier with the mushrooms and then all the synchronicities and stuff, I didn't do mushrooms after that experience, but then it was 6 months after that, and basically, um, but the mushrooms had like it had opened me up to, like, I was much more open to, like, the malleability, let's say, of the physical world. And so I had this issue with my posture, and I was in quite a lot of pain
oh
anyway.
yeah, exactly. We were there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was, a friend I worked with had recommended I watch this presentation by, are you aware of Bruce Lipton, Dr. Bruce Lipton?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was like 2010. And I watched a presentation he did on the biology of belief and how our beliefs and thoughts affect the expression of our genes and our entire, like, cellular environment. And I just got this, like, massive kind of eureka moment watching that, of like, it was like, why am I still in all this pain? Why am I still, like, in this physical pain if every cell in my body has been completely regenerated, some of it many times over, because the incident that caused this physical pain was like 7 years ago at that point, you know? And it was like, why is it still here? And I just realized it was like the emotions and the memory, that I was still holding on to. And I was like revivifying this continuously in my body. And I kind of had this mild visionary experience of watching my consciousness get put into a brand new fresh body, and that fresh body, like, quickly contorting to these pain patterns. And I was like, oh my God. And so that night, lying down in bed, I was basically just meditating, and I was like, I just knew that I could heal this. I just knew it that night. It was like this total knowing. And I was talking to my cells in my body, and I was just saying, look, I know we can heal this. We came together for some reason in this lifetime. We can heal this. And I just got into this total space of knowing. And for a moment, it was literally about, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds, maybe a bit longer. I felt my whole body completely healed, and all the pain was gone. And I could see this kind of, like, it was like this energy. It was really a mild vision, but I could see this kind of energy, like, coming down over my body. It was like this blue kind of energy, and I felt totally healed for a few, like I said, a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I fell asleep, and then I woke up a few hours later in the middle of the night, and it's like there was this. I'd been zapped around my leg with, like, this band of, like, electricity or something, just like like on my leg. And I woke up and I was really sick. I had to go to the toilet. I was really violently sick, and then I got back into bed, and I could just feel this energy just moving up and down my left leg. I was like, wow, this is really weird. But anyway, I fell asleep, woke up the next day, and it was kind of moving up the leg and moving elsewhere. And I was like, whoa. I started thinking, oh, I've triggered some kind of, I didn't realize it was Kundalini at that point. I thought I'd triggered this cellular healing. I was like, oh my God, something's happened, you know, like, this is amazing. Um, and then over the next week, it built up in intensity, stronger and stronger. I started getting these desires. They weren't uncontrollable at this point, but I started getting these kind of Kriyas and these desires to, like, dance in weird ways. It was like the energy was starting to move my body as soon as I surrendered into it a little bit. But yeah, over that week, it got stronger and stronger, and it accumulated one evening. I was staying at a friend's house, and I just didn't get any sleep that evening. interestingly enough, the room I was in, I walked into the room and there was a poster on the wall of this yogi sat cross-legged with like the Kundalini energy, all the chakras. Sat on
There she
a,
is again.
yeah, we sat on a tiger mat, like a tiger as a
Yeah,
mat.
the
It's just
tiger
like,
is
oh,
there also.
yeah, it's like the tiger was there.
Crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, that evening, I got no sleep and the energy was just really strong. It was doing all these crazy Kriyas on me. My hands were like moving and I was like pulling these energetic things out of me. And I started shifting into quite an altered state of consciousness. I could see like three beings around me that were working on me. And it was like, I remember the thought that came through that these were psychic surgeons. That was the phrase that came through to me. And they were like helping pull this stuff out. And it felt like they were moving my hands, but I was as well. And like, it was so weird. And I felt the big kind of England, I've forgotten the names exactly, but the two big streams of Kundalini like moving up through my body, and I felt it come out of like my head, and then it just went like boom into my temples. And when it did that, like all my crown opened, and I could feel like it was literally like the thousand petaled lotus. I remember like thinking that was just a metaphor, but I could just feel all these little petals opening on my head and energy just like pouring out. And I could see this portal open up in front of me, and there were loads of these beings coming through, and they were all just like watching. It was like they'd come to like watch this or something. That's what it felt like. Maybe they were my ancestors or something. So that was the initial kind of awakening. Um,
Yay.
and then the
Oh.
shutting down bit. So yeah, like from that, it was a couple of days later. I got back home. Um, and I was lying in bed and I just got all this fear, like huge amounts of fear coming up. I was terrified of like, because I told quite a lot of people because I was in quite a manic state in a way. Like I was, it was like my mind was completely blown. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. It was totally, and I was really like spiritually high in a certain way because there was so much of this like bliss and all these experiences that were just unbelievable to them. Like my concept of reality had been totally shattered in a way. Um, but I'd just been like telling loads of people, like all my friends, like. So I remember lying down and getting really paranoid and really anxious about it. I was like, it was a little bit of an ego death that went on because it was like, oh, what's everyone going to think about me? Like everybody's going to think I'm crazy. All these kind of fears of like my personality, of like what I presented to the world, like because I was like, I think I said earlier, I was in a band and I was just kind of, oh yeah, like cool guy doing all this stuff. And it's just like that was just like starting to crumble. And basically I started having like a kind of panic attack energy. And at a certain point, I just felt all that because there was the sparkling energy moving through me and the strong currents as well at that point. And I just felt it like drain down out of my body. And then the big currents like sort of twisted down. And I felt it about an inch beneath my base chakra. Well, no, it'll probably be where my energetically where it is, but an inch below my physical body at the base, just like wrap around itself. And then boom, like the energy was totally off. And then I was like, that spiraled me into this, like I was like, oh god, my fear has somehow aborted this healing process that I've started. So I got a little bit I was a bit down, like that had happened. I felt like I'd let myself down, failed, yeah, stuff like that. But over the next week, I basically just meditated every night, doing that kind of healing thing again. And I literally just said to the universe, like, look, if this is my path, I'm ready to walk it, And I can't remember the exact details because it was a long time ago. But one night, it just erupted again, and it's never stopped since then. And that was like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So following that, the energy just got stronger and stronger in the following month, which was like leading up to kind of Christmas 2010. It was the Kundalini. Interestingly enough, it awoke on Halloween 2010, which is pretty wild. That was the night it awoke. But yeah, but the energy just got stronger and stronger, and basically over a month, like my physical health just completely collapsed. Like the energy was so powerful and it was bringing up all these emotions. I was like, all these past emotions, like big traumas from the past were just coming up. And I was being like shown things like visually of like little events that happened in my childhood, and it was like showing this event, and like then it was like it like string on to these other events that were linked to it, and like showing these karmic patterns that had happened to me.
Wow.
The physical stuff was overwhelming. There were like spiraling, drilling vortexes in all my body. Like it felt like my muscles were being like ripped apart from the inside. There was like they were glue just being like stretched, and it was just so overwhelming, and I became increasingly extremely fatigued, and I think I went into a bit of a like fight or flight. I kind of went into a bit of shock around it. It was like, oh shit, I'm in deep here. What have I unleashed? It was like I couldn't hold what was going on. It was so strong and so powerful. And the physical
Yes.
symptoms were getting very, very painful. And so by the time it got to Christmas, I was really in a bad way. Like, yeah, and I ended up that kind of carried on, and I ended up being bedbound for about 2.5 to 3 years. So I was just spending hours in bed, just like with the energy, just doing all this crazy stuff, like frying through my body, continuous kriyas that I couldn't really control. In order to not have the kriyas moving me, I would have to like put physical effort in. So when I went down to eat dinner, for example, in the evening, it would be a strain for me to stop these movements, and that went on for quite a number of years. So it was extremely intense, and spending that amount of time bedbound as well, my muscles started to deteriorate somewhat. So it got to a point where I could barely walk.
It's
Um, I
crazy. Wow.
literally just like shuffle it. I could just literally shuffle. I was in agony like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for about, yeah, I would say agony for about 2.5 years. And then there was about a 4 year period coming out of that when it started to calm down a bit, where I had to really build myself up. And that was extremely difficult as well. I kind of had to learn everything again, like how to
Yeah, but
walk.
I mean, the physical part is one side, but how was your mental state that moment? I mean, this is crazy to deal with that.
Yeah. So mentally, I was having lots of altered states of consciousness as well. So
Okay.
seeing like lots of visionary experiences, seeing into other layers of reality. So many times I would see like spirits in my room at night, um,
And that freaked
interactions.
you out, or was it always your
Not really.
normal feeling?
It did. They didn't freak me out. I feel like so there were times. Obviously, it was extremely difficult, and there were times when I was afraid and um, yeah, like it was very, very difficult. But there was this part of me that always like there was this part of me that I could tap into that was just like, it's okay, it's a healing process, you need to go through this, it's okay. There was like this part of me that kind of held that throughout the whole thing, like no matter how difficult it was. And it was extremely difficult, but like, and that kind of kept me through it. I think, yeah, there was just this strength. There was this like strength that somehow could just draw on, like through it all, no matter what was going on. But yeah, it was extremely overwhelming, and mentally as well, and obviously continuously purging emotional stuff all the time as well. Like when I kind of joked earlier, I don't know if that was before we started recording, but it felt like I was on like an ayahuasca trip for like all the time for like 3 years or something, like everything coming up to be dealt with, every little fear, you have to face this, you have to face that, integrate it, all.
Yes, and I think this is also a topic which is important to demystify because I'm a yoga teacher, so I'm in that field a lot, and it's kind of irritating, of course, for me and for you as well, maybe when you hear a lot of people who are like, yeah, let's start to activate our Kundalini and start to, and
Yeah,
like the feeling like, yeah, then it goes, and then you're enlightened and everything is beautiful and well. And I'm like, yeah, the problem is, yeah, you and me, we hope that this will be the end, that we are happy and go lucky and see unicorns all the time. But the process to go there is you have to work through your shit.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's not like a shortcut, it's a fucking roller coaster. So,
Yeah.
and I think this is also important for people to know, it's gonna be a ride if you jump onto it, and if when it started, you can't go
Yeah, there's no turning back.
down on it.
Yeah.
It's
And
just going with you. So
yeah, you've got to face your shadow. It's gonna make you face every single thing.
yeah, and for me it's at what, and I'm sure you're the same. It's like somehow I always think people should know that. And on the other hand, I mean, it goes as it goes anyways. And people who get activated, they have to be activated. It's not like random, I think, but still, yeah.
Yeah,
It's just hard when you're thrown into the process like you or me, and you don't know what the hell is now going to happen and that you're going to suffer that much.
yeah,
So
yeah. Hopefully, as we move forward, because more and more people are going to be awakening, I'm 100% convinced of that. There will be like places where people can go to like have help during this process. I can imagine like in, I don't know, 20 years or whatever, the landscape will be very different, and this will be more understood, and there'll be a lot more help for people. Like, yeah, even just 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, there was a lot less information out there than there is now. So there's a lot of,
yeah.
there's a lot of progress in that regard. But, and just touching on your other point as well, yeah, from my perspective, this energy awakens when it's meant to. Like, that doesn't mean you're going to have an easy ride necessarily. You might have to go through a big dark night initiation, like, because that's your path, and that's what you have to go through. But I feel like it's like a flower. Like, the flower comes up out of the ground and opens in its own time. Like, you can't pull it up, force the petals. That's not how it works. Like, this energy is everywhere. It's like this stream. Like, and as soon as there's that opening, when a soul's ready, or then it's going to flow in, and there's no so like, you could use the phrase like spontaneous Kundalini awakening, which is kind of like what I would refer to mine as, but ultimately it's not spontaneous at all, really. It's
That's,
like it's very much happening at the right moment, when it's ready, when it's ripe, and there's all these causal factors flowing into that moment to kind of have this emergence. Yeah.
yes, that is also my experience. Like sometimes I say it happened unprepared, but in the end, I was really asking for it because I think I had kind of a classical one, and also I see parallels to yours.
Mm.
For me, the normal journey that is happening is that people, they come into a dark night of the soul, and then they start questioning. And I was, for 2 years, I didn't do anything else than really searching for the truth.
Yeah.
And while I was doing that, I went down the rabbit hole, really. I always say I was like Alice in Wonderland,
Yeah.
just going down the rabbit hole and into every corner of being totally fooled. Like I was one of these persons who was very much into conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Fuck, there is dark Illuminati and they're controlling us. So I was like, I was just into that, and that brought me into occultism. And through occultism, I really started to understand there's a lot of symbolism. And so my journey was that way. I went into the dark, and then I understood, well, when there's so much darkness, there has to be the same amount of light. And then I turned to the positive side of these teachings, like, okay, so let's see. First of all, you understand that Yeah, that there is a certain truth about all that stuff, but you are really hooked when you start to think that way. You're really hooked. And so you have to also learn to let the fear go, whatever
Yeah,
is going on that planet, and come out on the other side. And this I find very fascinating, because I was there 6 years ago, and now it starts. It's crazy how many people are into conspiracy.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and it's difficult for me to handle that, because I'm like, yeah, been there, done that. Now let it go.
yeah,
But also this I learned, you cannot force it. People have to go down that rabbit hole until they find the end where they turn. So just let them run, run, run.
definitely, yeah, 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 because they're gonna a lot, not everyone, but a lot of people who go down that are going to come through the other side. Like I kind of got this phrase one time about like the whole conspiracy movement, and I see it as like cultural shadow work. You know, like
Hmm.
it's like like what goes on internally, where we dive into our own shadow during the awakening and face all our darkness and all those thoughts, and you know, it's all in us. It's all in us. Everything out there is in us.
So
Um,
funny. The same with me.
yeah, so it's like
Yeah,
that going on the cultural scale. So it is important in the sense that like all this darkness is faced and brought up, but yes, you don't want to sit in that forever. It's about facing it, understanding it, realizing it, and then shifting into like, okay, well, what's the response to this? And the response is not continually figuring it all out all the time. The response is like moving into the light, not ignoring that. Like I'm not somebody who would like
exactly. Yeah.
ignore that, but it's like don't completely engulf yourself in it, just like you wouldn't completely engulf yourself in your own shadow. You work through it, you know, you work. So I totally honor and agree with what you're saying around that. Like, and that was exactly my journey. Like I
So funny.
really dove deep into all that stuff, and I'm aware of it, but it doesn't occupy like my mind or energy field that much. You know, it's like, and also I can be, I'm at some level, I'm at peace with it. Like
Exactly.
I don't agree that I don't agree with it like that it's good or anything like that. You
I
know,
know.
it's
I
just I'm at peace with it, and I recognize that the dark. You know, I've had experiences of really moving into massive love for that darkness in the world because it helped me. It helped me awaken. You know, it helped me awaken,
wow.
and it took me into the light, and it
Oh yes.
also like just seeing the deep suffering that those beings and entities and whatever, they're in a deep suffering. They're completely disconnected from source, not completely, but they're very disconnected from source,
Yeah.
and in so much trauma, hence why they do that stuff. So like ultimately we want to get to like viewing that through the eyes of compassion, I think.
Oh, it's amazing. And it's really beautiful. But you see the parallels, it's always a bit like that. So people go they are starting the quest, searching for truth. And then you're misguided. All these deceptions stored. And it's like there. And I still say I was really on the borderline. It could have been that I go into a psychosis,
Mm.
but I was lucky to, that very moment where I was very much into fear. And that happened because of these conspiracy theories. I was like, oh my God, this world is so crazy. And I was so much in fear. But that very moment where it was like this, what is happening to her mental state, I let go of so much basic fear. At It was like somebody pulled the rock under my feet. And I was lucky that something saved me. And then the right that day, the vibration in my lower spine started. So like a motor starting. Yeah, I always felt that vibration. And I'm still sure it was like a purging of a lot of basic fears, which, yeah, made it possible to do that. So I see these parallels really often. Um, yeah, that quest for truth, and then however that is with mushrooms, and then it starts. So it's fascinating, and it's for me, it's really fascinating that I can see it now, how it's happening. A lot of people, also Corona, a lot of people went into fear like crazy, and I was like, hey, chill. Hey, take it easy. Take the shot, don't take the shot, I don't care. It's I'm just not being thrown into these fear states anymore. And really, really fascinating. And for me, it was also a process of understanding that this is also all that we see outside is our internal process. And I actually felt kind of betrayed when I then started to research, and I understood, like, also all these stories in the Bible, nobody tells you it's, when you see Jesus and he died on the Golgotha, so the skull mountain, like, you feel so betrayed because they tell you the process.
Yeah, because there's those different layers in that story. Yeah, those esoteric layers for sure. Yeah,
exactly. So it's really fascinating. Yeah. Oh, so so nice to talk to you.
thank
So
you.
yeah, let me know, is there anything else you kind of find it very important to share out of your journey, and what is your biggest insight during that journey?
I don't know. That's a big question. That
Yeah, right.
my biggest insight. I mean, I guess my biggest insight, I suppose, has to be that, like, yeah, I guess me and the whole God, source, everything are one. Like I guess that's the biggest insight. The collapse of any stories of separation that I held prior to this. I mean, on one, I'm not. I really like the kind of idea of like non-dual, like, as in, we are one, we are everything, but we are having a separate experience. But ultimately, yeah, I am one with everything.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the biggest realization.
Okay, yeah. And how do you see so what is happening right now? Like, do you also have the feeling of that there's a lot of change happening and people are awakening on a big scale, or do you think we are just aware of that now because we're connected through internet and it happened all the time?
Well, I think there's
No.
no, I think there's a rapid acceleration going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a rapid acceleration going on. I mean, the internet is definitely part of that, but like there's a chicken and the egg or whatever. It's like the internet came about probably because of that as well. But it's like, yeah, the internet is like the externalization of this nervous system where all the little parts can connect and just share this information. So that's definitely helping accelerate it. But I totally think there's an acceleration. I'm very much, it would probably be way too much to get into to fully explain this. But are you aware of like the concept of the yuga cycles?
No.
So there's a Vedic concept of the yuga cycles, which is that time is cyclical in nature,
Mm-hmm.
and that we go through these different ages. So you might have heard of like the golden age, and
Oh, yeah. And
yeah,
I think like the 26,000 years is one cycle. Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So in Hindu, in the Hindu tradition, they actually believe it to be way longer than that. But um, there was a book called The Holy Science by Sri Yukteswar, who was the guru of Paramahansa Yogananda, who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. It's quite, that
Yeah.
famous book. And his guru was one of them. I think he was the first person in modern times to say, yeah, it's about 24 to 26,000 years, and that truth got distorted through history because they didn't want people to freak out that they were going into Kali Yuga, basically. So
Yeah, I understand.
the priests at the time, like, you know, did a bit of manipulation and stuff. But yeah, so and he's tying it into the precession of the equinox, which is the 24 to 26,000 year thing of like the sun moving through each house of the zodiac. So yeah, there's loads more to that, but essentially, I believe that cycle is governing the consciousness of humanity, and we have just entered spring, basically. So everybody popping off with these Kundalini awakenings, it's just like the first buds of spring come in, you know, and there's no like value judgment. The first bud is no better than the last bud, you know, like they're all beautiful. But I think like people having these awakening now are like these early buds of spring in this great cycle, and I see it as just accelerating more and more and more as we move forward, to a point where it reaches like where it just breaks through, and there's a gradual but massive shift in human consciousness over a relatively short period of time. I think
it's also interesting that also the, you know, stuff like the plant medicine, they're coming now more and more. And yeah, I when I see my own process, I find it very interesting to see it on my own consciousness and my own body. It's like I also get very, how do you say, I just feel like, okay, wow, we are like kids in kindergarten, and it's very sweet because now I understand. We always thought we're very, very, you know, like the epicenter, and we're so intelligent. And now I'm more like, oh, it's so sweet. Like you start to wake up, and ooh. And also, you know, with stuff like sexuality, I think it's very funny when you start to understand certain stuff on that process. It's like, oh my God, where are we? What are we doing here? It's really like kindergartners playing with matches, and we don't know anything. And and so
that's a big journey.
You get really humble. I feel really like a kindergartner in the process. And I also think like, okay, Catherine, you are now one of the earlier ones, so you're a bit like a kindergartner who has to play with matches now, but even the next generation will have it easier.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we still stumble our way a bit. Right?
Yeah.
But they're going to have an easier one.
Yeah, I would think definitely, because all this trauma and all this inner work that people are starting to do is going to be clearing it for the collective. Anybody who goes through Kundalini awakening, well, I can't speak for everybody, but the chances are you're going to start clearing stuff for the collective as well. I mean, I guess you've probably had experiences similar to this, but I've like had purges of like feeling the pain of Gaia, you know, like feeling the earth's pain, like
oh my God, oh yes,
you know, like all that kind of stuff, and moving into like all these aspects of the unconscious and the shadow, that are not even necessarily ours. It's just like it exists in the collective. So there's a lot of that collective purging that goes on, and therefore I feel like the energetic state of the collective of humanity will be more vibrationally aligned for souls that are starting to come in now, who are already like, they're going to come in with awoken Kundalinis. There's going to be being more souls coming in with awoken Kundalinis. It's like that vibration is raising, and then those who come in, there's not as much of a, like, it's just a softer and more gentle environment for awakening as we move forward. It's not like we wake up in this like, we're becoming mega sensitive, and we're surrounded by all this pretty, you know, difficult energy, to say the least. Because part of the problem is you become so energetically sensitive. It's like you're feeling everyone else's stuff. Like I remember going to the supermarket, and it's just like, oh my God, I'm like feeling the pain of every single being in there, and like it's difficult being sensitive on the planet right now, you know, because we are still early in this process, and I think that's something that'll be easier for people as well, you know, as we like move forward.
Yeah, and already, knowing a bit into the collective, how you start to understand what is collective pain and what is really mine, and where are the, how do you say, where are the overlapping, because it is kind of overlapping, and sometimes you don't quite understand what's going on. And yeah, there's really a lot to learn for.
Yeah, I think Kundalini like guides us in that learning. I can't really put like a technique on it, but I know like for me now, it's very easy for me to distinguish between like what is somebody, like say I'm like stood with somebody talking to them and I might feel like some anxiety. It's very easy for me to discern whether that's mine or whether that's or whether I'm like picking up their
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
You know, it's that become
Yeah.
a thing. Yeah, there was an example of this because I work energetically with people quite a lot when I'm doing healing. I was doing group breath work once, and I was doing some hands-on healing with someone. And after I walked away from this particular person, I could feel all this like dark, horrible energy in my body, and I was like, "Oh my god!" I've like this was early on when I just started doing this type of work. I was like, "Oh no!" I've picked something up, and I started panicking a little bit. And I just got this download of like, just ask Kundalini to clear it. And I was like, yeah, I was just like, okay, Kundalini, just clear this. And immediately, just like this kind of blissful Kundalini just dissolved it into nothing. I was like, okay.
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
you know, so,
Very,
so
very.
magical.
Yeah, yeah. Nah, it's good, and yeah, maybe we can in another talk dive even more into these insights.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, would be interesting. So yeah, but for now,
Yeah.
you see, yeah, we have we have an hour or more.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so fascinating, and yeah, I really would love to also, um, have other talks with
Sure.
more deep insights,
Yeah.
especially what I was also thinking about. I told some other people who I interviewed already, it would be very nice to have once a group call
Yeah.
with some people, and then we can just talk about certain topics, who thinks about what when it comes to certain topics. I think that would be very interesting. That's
Yeah.
also something which I would find very fascinating, to have more meetings with people, also to see what is happening energetically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that and happy to come back on another chat and yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, perfect. So I will let you know for sure. But right now, thank you very much
Yeah.
for this beautiful talk. And yeah, let's stay in contact. Thank you.
Thank you.